Hey guys, it is Colton from Colton Does Cars here, and today we're going to be talking about why it is that I chose a 2008 WRX over, say, an Evo or a Rally Art or an STI even, I guess, or say like a Civic Si, Mspeed 3, Focus ST, anything like that. And I think I have an interesting perspective on this compared to a lot of people because I have actually driven every single one of those besides the Evo and the Rally Art. So I have a pretty good comparison on what I think of all of them. So I mean, the first reason is kind of a more trivial reason, like a lot of reasons for buying cars, I guess, in the first place. And that's just, I've always loved Subarus, especially WRXs, but just Subarus in general even. I went over this briefly when I did my video of actually when I got this car and everything, but I guess I didn't really go super in depth with it, but just when I was younger, like 10 or 11 or so, I remember I always, like, I'd go onto Auto Trader and I barely even knew how to use it at the time, and I would always like search WRXs or even just regular Imprezas, and at the time I think it was like a blob eye that I really wanted. And I remember showing these listings to my mom, being like, I really want to get one of these as my first car and different things, and she was kind of like, yeah, you know, maybe not. If it was, it probably would just be a regular Impreza, and I don't think I even cared at the time. I just liked the styling, and since ultimately the Imprezas and the WRXs for a long time have still looked really similar, I was perfectly happy with that idea. Over time, I kind of got other interests in cars and stuff, like I ended up wanting something like a GTO, like a BRZ at one point, so still got the Subaru there, didn't want an FRS, wanted a BRZ. And then eventually 350Z, which was my second car I got. The first car I got was a 2001 Volkswagen Jetta 1.8 turbo 5-speed, and I highly recommend that to anyone that's looking for one. I still really loved that car, and part of my heart will always be with my little Jetta. But with a more adult standpoint, looking at buying a car, why did I choose a WRX over all those other options that I mentioned before? Well, like I said, I actually have driven most of those. I guess I haven't technically driven an STI, but my friend Jason has a WRX that has a EJ207 engine swap, which is the JDM STI engine, I believe. So I have kind of sort of experienced that. It has a tune on it and everything. Really sweet car. So it's not exactly a perfect perspective for an STI, but I had the basic idea. Or a Mspeed 3 or a Civic Si, Focus ST, because I have driven all of those cars. I will say, as far as the Civic Si goes, I think it's a really sweet car. I think it'd be like an awesome car for like a daily driver or something like that, or like a first like cool car, I guess I would say, sort of. And I have a friend that has one, she loves it, and honestly, I think it's really awesome too. But for me, there's something about it that I just didn't quite connect with. Like, it's just not quite the same as like the older Civic SIs. Like, it doesn't scream to redline or something like that. It's just like, I don't know. It's a great car, no doubt, but there's just nothing about it that wowed me. There was no specific thing where I was like, man, I love this about it. It's like, it handled good, the shifter's really nice and everything. It's super easy to drive. Like, honestly, probably like the easiest manual car to drive that I've ever driven. The interior's super nice, and again, I mean, it's fun to drive, but there's just something about it that just isn't quite there for me, and I don't even really know what it is. As far as the Focus ST goes, honestly, I love Focus STs. My friend Bobby had one, and it was a super sick car. I've always really liked them. They're surprisingly quick in a straight line, like more surprising than you might think, especially if you've never been exposed to anything that's like kind of on the sportier side when it comes to cars. It's like, it's really genuinely quick, and the handling is like super sharp. It's like, you don't expect something that's front wheel drive like that to have such like a lively feel, but it really does. And it has so much low end torque that it's just like, I don't know, it's hard to even describe, but it's a lot of fun, and the seats are awesome. The shifter feels really nice. Again, it's not a very hard car to drive either. I really liked it. But for me, again, there's something about it that I just didn't quite connect with, I guess I would say. I did like it a lot more than the Civic Si. Again, I loved the Civic Si, I really did, but the Focus ST just has more to me. I don't know. I found it more interesting, I guess. But it's just, there's little things like, personally, I don't think they sound very good. They're just kind of nasally sounding, and as far as like aftermarket upgrades for them, they don't make power that well. They build torque like crazy, but they don't make like power very well, which is kind of odd to me. I guess it's probably mostly like the turbo size, because if I remember correctly, it's pretty small, and like I said, it spools up really fast, has a bunch of low end torque, but it just kind of drops off at the top end. And again, just there's something about it where I loved it, but I just didn't quite connect with it. And it's one of those things you can't even really put your finger on, but it's there. As far as the Mazda Speed 3 goes, from the other options that I've driven, that one was my favorite. Probably because it's the most similar to the WRX, to be honest, in my personal opinion anyway. Don't hold me to that. It's a more traditional, modified turbo car feel, I guess I would say. It's a little more childish feeling than like the other options. Those feel kind of refined, and like on the Mazda's side of the spectrum, it kind of feels like they sort of just like threw all they had at it, just threw it together, but they didn't have like a huge budget to really engineer it, which I think Mazda pretty much confirmed about the Speed 3, which is kind of funny. But yet in that way, I actually personally really like that. It does have more torque steer than the Focus ST, that is for sure. It definitely torque steers a decent amount, and honestly that doesn't bother me. Like, some people get really bothered by torque steer. Like, I know it's not the greatest thing for, well, safety, depending on how you're driving, and just like, you know, sometimes it's annoying having the wheel jerking and trying to fight against you, but it makes it feel like a little monster, which I find kind of awesome. Also, just the way it spooled and the way everything sounded, just sounded so much more traditionally tuner car. It had a really deep grumble, kind of almost reminds me of like a Subaru Boxer sound. Not quite that like rumbly, but it just was really deep, and it sounded awesome, honestly. I loved how it sounded. And the way the turbo and everything spooled, it wasn't quite so much low-end torque as it was like you had to get on it and then the turbo spooled, then it would put you back in your seat more. And honestly, I found that a lot more fun, and I really did absolutely love that car. You can see on my review, and I want to say too that with a lot of different reviews and things that people put out there, they drive it for a day, and that's their perspective on it, is one day. But that exact car, I actually have driven plenty of times. Like I said, that car is also owned by my friend Bobby, who owned the Focus ST. Sadly, that car got totaled. So the Speed 3 is also owned by him. So I've driven it a bunch of times, and I know how that car feels, and I really do like it. And the main thing that it came down to is that it's not all-wheel drive, and honestly, it's just not quite my style, I guess I would say. I love hot hatches. Honestly, I mean, it's a WRX hatch. It pretty much is a hot hatch, but not in the same typical way that you might be expecting if you hear the word hot hatch. At least if you're me anyway. I love them, but they're just not quite my thing, I guess I would say. They have a bunch of performance potential. They're super great. They're awesome daily drivers. But just for me, I'd rather have something that's either all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. Not that you'll almost ever need all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive versus front-wheel drive unless you're building big power. But it's just, for me, I really wanted all-wheel drive in my daily driver, and that's because if you can't see out the windows, it's winter here. We get a lot of snow. We've had a crap ton of snow this winter just since like last month. So I really wanted something that was good in snow, and honestly, Subarus have had those reputations for years or even decades. So that's another reason why I went with the WRX. So the last one is, why did I not go with an Evo / Rally Art? And this comes down to such a stupid, not necessarily controversial, but obvious reason. That is the budget. As stupid as this may sound, when you compare SCI to Evo, even though I own a WRX, I actually think I prefer the Evo. There's just something about it to me that's more rare, and it's just more interesting when you see one in comparison to the STI. At least where I'm from, it's like you can see WRXs and STIs all the time. When you see an Evo, it's a lot more of a rare sighting. When I first started looking at getting a different daily in selling my Jetta, I really considered getting an Evo, but what it just really came down to is I just was not going to be able to afford it realistically. Because even if you can afford price, you've also got to factor in insurance. I'm young, insurance is freaking expensive. And you know, like all these different things, the Evo also drinks gas. worse than the WRX somehow, which is surprising because this doesn't do amazing on gas either. And so, same thing with the STI, it's just kind of a bit out of my price range, and it's not something I really need anyway because this is a daily. I'm not really planning on modifying it that much. That's what my 350Z is for. And then as far as the Rally Art goes, I've never driven a Rally Art. I've always thought they were cool. I really considered getting one as my first car years ago, which I don't think I mentioned, but yeah, I did. But I just prefer manual transmissions. I know it's an automated manual, it's dual clutch, which is awesome. In a car like that, a dual clutch is ridiculous and it's super cool. So that is obviously a step above an automatic transmission. You don't have to deal with these slush box things. It's super responsive, shifts ridiculously fast. But one, those transmissions do not put power to the ground as well as the manual transmissions in the Evos, and they're just not quite as reliable. Plus, if you have like a problem with the clutch in the dual clutch transmission, you got two problems. So ultimately, that's what it came down to, because years ago, if they had made manual Rally Arts and they would have sold better, because they would have sold better if they had a manual option, I may have had one of those instead of this right now. What it comes down to is, I'm a Subaru dude at heart. I've always loved Subarus, and I always will love Subarus, and this car was exactly what I needed. And this car came up, it was an awesome deal, it was perfectly what I was looking for. It's manual. It sounds awesome. Super Rumble, I'm sorry, it's like the best sounding 4-cylinder sound. Fight me, you're not gonna win. And ultimately, just this is the car that I connect with out of all these different cars, because like I said, I have driven WRXs before and everything, and I've always really liked them and different things. They're so sweet, they sound awesome, they handle great. But this is newer than the older like blob eyes that I was looking at before, albeit not by that much. It's an 08, so it's not super new or anything. But I got a great deal on this car. It handles awesome, it drives awesome, it sounds awesome. The interior's pretty nice. I'm just really happy with this car, basically. Now, had I picked any of those other cars, do I think I would have liked them? Absolutely, especially the Mazda Speed 3 and the Focus ST. Would have loved those cars for sure. But they just don't quite fit the needs that I have for a daily driver like this car does, and ultimately, that's what it comes down to, and I just like this car. That's what's really important at the end of the day. Because no matter how perfect a car may seem for you, if you don't like it, you just don't like it. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys spending the time and watching my videos and different things. If you did enjoy this video and you agree with me, make sure to leave a like, or maybe leave a comment on what car you would have chosen or what your opinion is. And if you didn't like this video, dislike the video, but let me know why so that I can improve. I have a lot more content planned and different things that I want to do, such as a review for this car, an ownership update and review for my 350Z, a comparison between the two, some other videos of my 350Z, things that are done on that, and just doing some basic things to clean up this car. So all that will be coming as soon as possible. Hopefully winter ends as soon as possible, and that would help. Again, thank you guys, and I will see you guys later.